Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and this is my basic flight guide that's going to guide you through your first steps through basic flight in Star Citizen. The reason why I put this guide together is because obviously Star Citizen is a space sim, and a very deep one at that, so it has quite a bit of a learning curve. So hopefully my guide here is going to help you through that learning curve and get through it easily without ending up pavement dust. So let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I'm going to be using the Gladius for this demonstration, but everything I'm going to show you here all applies to every other ship in the game. Regardless of what ship you own, it's all the same principles. But before we get started, this video is sponsored by my good friends at Eyewear Tech, who make the Tobii Eye Tracker, an affordable solution to expensive hardware head trackers. If you're looking for a head tracker but don't want to break the bank, consider checking out the Tobii Eye Tracker. Links will be down below in the description, along with a link to my video review. They are also running a spring sale right now until the 3rd of April, so now's the best time to snag one if you're interested. Alright, let's jump right back to the video. Alright, before we even get to the actual basics of flight, we need to actually talk about how Star Citizen's flight model actually works. Star Citizen uses a Newtonian model for its flight, and what that means is Newtonian physics. Any object that stays in motion will stay in motion until it is acted upon by another force. And that means that we have thrusters and engines dotted around our ships to help us get around the verse and in atmosphere. Every ship in Star Citizen is outfitted with this model, so every ship has main thrusters, maneuvering thrusters, which are those little guys you see there wiggling on the top of my ship, and if I go all the way to the front of my ship with my camera, retro thrusters, which help the ship slow down forward momentum and help the ship reverse as well too. Like I said, every ship in Star Citizen has the same guiding principle in mind. Some are a little bit different. For example, some alien ships have the ability to articulate their main engines as if they were maneuvering thrusters, and others can articulate their main engines into a VTOL configuration to help with landing and takeoff. Either way, all the principles are the same: main engines, maneuvering thrusters, and retrograde thrusters. Now, keep in mind that these thrusters are modeled in full detail in Star Citizen. That means the little effects that you see on the thrusters as they're firing are not just visual effects. They actually have wind volumes attached to them, so that means players can even be knocked off their feet by these thrusters if you fly too close to them. They can also be damaged or destroyed, which can adversely affect the performance of your ship, and in many cases they can even wear out. For example, these thrusters gimbal. If I decided to fly this ship for a long period of time and never repair them, those thrusters can eventually wear out, and eventually those gimbals that they are on can actually stick and cause adverse performance effects. So this is a very important key factor to understand in Star Citizen. Always remember where your engines are located because they will help you when you're maneuvering your ship. In this case, because I know I have a lot of power in that rear with that main engine, I can do really tight cuts with my turns as I fly around, and I can do really cool maneuvers. And of course, if I had VTOL articulating engines that pointed my engines down, I could do even tighter maneuvers. Always remember where your main thrust output is coming from, and you will be just fine flying in the verse. Alright, let's move on to controls. Star Citizen uses a WASD style first-person shooter control configuration for controlling ships. You have your mouse for pitch and yaw, Q and E to roll left and right respectively. You also have the ability to throttle forward with W, throttle down and reverse with the S key. You have the ability to strafe left and right with the A and D keys. You can also strafe up with spacebar, strafe down with control, and that's it. That's the main basic keys for flying around in Star Citizen. Now by default, you'll notice there is a line coming to my mouse here as I fly around. This is obviously my mouse input, but you'll notice that I don't have to drag my mouse across my mouse pad in order to get full rotations for my ship. This is because Star Citizen uses what's known as a virtual joystick input method for flying. If you played games like War Thunder or any other type of game that involves mouse controls for its simulation aspect, this is a very similar function. You can turn this off with a keybind settings, which is known as relative mode. By default, it's not bound, so you can set it yourself in the keybinds option, and you can have one-to-one controls if you do not want to use the virtual joystick. Now, by default, I recommend obviously you use the virtual joystick so you're not constantly fighting your mouse to try to get your ship to turn around. However, some pilots like the one-to-one control, especially when they're dogfighting, so that is a consideration you may have. Alright, so that's it for the basic controls. We'll go over more controls as we move along, but for now we're going to talk about the HUD. And this right now you're seeing here on my screen is what's known as the basic or compact HUD. Like I said, I'm in a Gladius here, however, this HUD is identical for every other ship in the game. It doesn't matter what model you fly. The only thing that might be different is the location of some of the clusters and elements for this HUD. First, let's take a look at the left side here. So we have a few elements on that left gauge above the MFD, and that cluster is known as the speed tape. As I apply throttle forward, you'll see the speed tape increases and actually fills up. And to the right of the speed tape, you'll see a numerical value in meters per second. This is literally just all my speed. And below that is the G meter, how many Gs I'm actually pulling in this ship. You'll also notice that there is a line at the far right end, a little tiny thing there, and that is called the speed limiter. If I hold Alt plus mouse wheel and I mouse wheel down, you'll see I pull the limiter down. I can also raise the limiter. The speed limiter is just that, a speed limiter. If I bring it all the way down to, let's do about 78 meters per second, that is going to be the max throttle output of my ship. I can only now go to 78 meters per second, which is really handy if you're trying to land. Obviously, you don't want to land at full speed and crash into the side of a station or planet or wherever you're trying to land at. Speed limiter is very, very handy for that. Of course, if I don't want it, I can now hold Alt plus mouse wheel and scroll all the way to the top. And now I have full access to the power output of my ship. You'll notice that the speed limiter is actually limited, and the throttle output is also limited. As I speed up here, let's go all the way to the max. You'll see that the throttle output does not actually go very high. It doesn't even go all the way to the far right. This is because I am locked into what's known as SCM, Standard Combat Maneuvers. In SCM mode, which is a type of master mode, this mode will turn on my weapons, shields, and countermeasures. It also locks my speed at a very specific combat speed, in this case 224 meters per second, because this is the most maneuverable my ship can be for combat. Anything higher than this and I start to lose maneuverability of my ship. So the ship locks itself at this speed to ensure better fluid combat. And you can see the master mode and what's known as an operator mode on the left side of the speed tape there. So right here, you can see it says SCM, current master mode, and then you have gun. So I'm currently using my guns mode, so I can actually fire. I can even switch to different types of operator modes, for example, missile operator mode, scan operator mode, and then back to guns. We'll talk about that later, but right now, currently, I just want you guys to note that that is where you can see what current mode you're in. If I hold B on my keyboard, that's B as in Bravo, I can switch to nav mode. And you'll notice there's a cooldown as my quantum drive spools up. Once it is spooled up fully, I now have full access to my throttle power output. In nav mode, I have no ability to use my weapons, my shields are offline, and my countermeasures are also offline, but I have full power to my throttle output and engine, so I can fly as fast as I want. As well as I can use quantum travel. If I were, for example, in the persistent universe, I can now quantum to the star or other planets nearby. If I need to get into combat, so for example, this station here, let's say this station has hostile starships around it that I need to fight, I can fly up to it at the highest speed I have. Once I'm ready to drop out and start fighting, I can hold B on my keyboard to switch to SCM guns. And you notice my shields are now online, my weapon systems are online, my countermeasures are online. These are the two common modes that you're going to be cycling through in Star Citizen as you fly around in the verse. You'll notice on the speed tape this little plus icon. This is letting you know whether you're throttling forward or backwards. If I go in reverse here, you'll notice it turns into a negative and my throttle speed tape reverses. If I go forward here and I start to go forward, you'll see it turns into a plus. Handy because in space, you might not know your actual direction of travel. You may be flying, turning around, and actually be flying backwards and not even knowing it. And the throttle tape, speed tape, can tell you. Alright, The next cluster on the right is our afterburner output indicators. We have it AB 100%, that is the capacitor for the afterburner. Currently it's at 100%. Afterburner always recharges its capacitor after use. Below that it says H and a percentage value, that is our hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen fuel is very, very important for getting around in the verse. If you run out of hydrogen fuel, your ship is dead in the water because it needs that to power the thrusters. Next to the AB indicator, we have the AB capacitor indicator here. Think of it as like a battery. The more you drain your afterburner, the more this bar will drain until eventually it reaches nothing. Once you run out, you can't use it until it fully recharges. The little circle next to it is the throttle ramp up of the afterburner as well as the cooldown. When I engage the afterburner, you'll notice there's going to be a bar that fills up before it hits maximum. The afterburner is not an instant power boost. It has a small ramp up time. Some ships are a lot slower in their ramp up times. In this case, I'm in the Gladius, so the ramp up is going to be fairly quick. Once the ramp up time is complete, the throttle from the AB output and the overcharge in the thrusters is at max power, meaning the ship is operating at max capacity of its thrusters at the cost of hydrogen fuel, of course. When I let go of the afterburner, or boost, as it's also known as, you'll see it turns red and it will count back down. And that is the cooldown before I can use the boost once more. Let me give you a demonstration of that. As I throttle forward here, I'm going to engage my boost. You can see the ramp up, and then you can see the actual charge being drained. You'll notice also on the far right end of the capacitor for the boost is a red highlighted area. That is the minimum boost. If I go below that, and then I let off the afterburner here, I no longer can use it until it actually reaches above that minimum threshold. In this case, the minimum threshold on the Gladius is 25%. So if I go below 25%, I can't use it until it's charged up past that point. Some ships are different. Others have a threshold of 10% or less sometimes. But for the most part, the average is around 25%. Now that we are charging back up, you'll notice when I let go, that red line filled up. That was the small cooldown. Again, it's a Gladius, so the cooldown is very short. Other ships may have a much longer cooldown period after using the boost. You'll also notice while in SCM here, while I'm locked to the speed, when I boost, I temporarily can exceed my SCM speeds. And you'll notice that I now go all the way to the maximum, around 518 or 17 in this case, meters per second. That's the maximum I can go while in SCM. So while I can't go as fast as nav mode, you see that even with boost, I definitely can exceed at least half of that, if not more. To the right of the afterburner capacitor is the countermeasures indicators. You'll see I have 47 decoy and 5 noise. Decoys are for spoofing missiles. Noise is for dropping off enemy radar. You can use decoys with H on your keyboard and J for noise respectively. This is more handy for combat than it is for basic flight, but it's important that you should know it now in case you do get into a little bit of combat. Always remember to only use your decoys for spoofing missiles. Don't use noise. Noise doesn't work against missiles that are already locked onto you. Alright, let's bring our attention to the center of the HUD. On the top here, because I'm in atmosphere, you'll see a heading tape here. When you're not in atmosphere and in space, this heading tape no longer will be shown. You'll also see the pitch ladder with the horizon line markers, and this also is because I am in atmosphere. Positive pitch attitude, in the case here for these degree rung markers, means that I'm pointed away from the planet or moon that I'm currently on. Negative pitch attitude, denoted by these marks here, means that I'm pointed towards the planet or moon. On the right side of the HUD, you can see the altimeter in kilometers. Again, this won't show up and the pitch ladder won't show up if you're not in atmosphere. Next, I want to talk with you about the radar. Now, the radar is a little bit beyond the scope of this video, but what you should know is in atmosphere, your degree markers and your current heading, your azimuth is shown at the bottom as well. The radar is good for showing radar contacts around you and is good for navigating other ships that could be in the area, both hostile and potentially friendly. Alright, so we've talked about the speed tape cluster, the afterburner capacitor cluster, and the central elements that you can expect when in atmosphere, as well as the radar. Next, let's talk about the miscellaneous status indicators down below here. The first one on the left we have is VTOL, which stands for vertical takeoff and landing. Like I mentioned before, some ships have the ability to articulate their main engines into a VTOL configuration. The Gladius doesn't have one, but you can still enable it anyway. All ships can enable it with K, that's kilo, on your keyboard. I can turn it on and off here, but like I said, the Gladius doesn't actually have VTOL capabilities, so it doesn't actually affect it at all, although I can turn it on here if I so choose to. The next is the gear status indicator, which shows you whether the gear is down or not. Being that it's empty here, it means the gear is currently up. If it's down, it will be filled up. And another handy tip is actually if I pull my gear down here, you'll see a gear status indicator shows up on the speed tape as well. And it shows when the gear is currently in transit downward and when the gear is fully extended. And you'll see now that the icon here is now fully lit up. And now we can raise the gear, and you'll see the icon is now no longer lit up. There we go. The next option we have here, the GSAF option, which stands for G-Safe. G-Safe will automatically tell IFCS to try to do its best to prevent the pilot from G-locking themselves. And as you saw as I was flying around earlier, it seems like it's pretty easy to get my pilot pretty tired when I do some pretty nasty maneuvers. However, IFCS is always going to modulate the output of my thrusters to always make sure I am riding the edge of G-locking. And if you're not familiar with what G-locking is, that is when your character passes out from a blackout or a red out from too many G's, whether positive or negative G's. So if I do a really hard maneuver here, let's get a little bit of boost there. You'll see that the view changes a little bit as I start to maneuver a little bit harder. Starts to fade out the colors a little bit, and the view starts to vignette a little bit more. And what's going to happen is IFCS, as long as G-Safe is active, is always going to try to prevent me from blacking out. This takes a little bit of control away from me, as I'm not modulating the ship myself. The ship itself is doing it all on its own, and that takes a little bit of control away from me. Some pilots don't like that and may opt to turn it off. I'll show you guys in a little bit here how you can turn that on and off at your will, but for now we're going to move on to the next cluster on the right. And you'll see we have CPLD, that stands for coupled. Currently I'm in coupled mode. There are two different modes of flight in Star Citizen. You have coupled mode, which means that the moment I let go of my throttle output here, the ship will now automatically arrest any momentum and bring me to a stop. Really useful for rookie pilots for the most part, because you don't have to worry about constantly holding the throttle output, and if you just want to slow down, you let go of the throttle and the ship will slow down to a stop. However, if you want IFCS to no longer take control of the ship from you, and you want the ship to behave like a real mass object in space or a vacuum would be, you can turn off coupled and switch to decoupled mode. You can do that by hitting C or Charlie on your keyboard. And now IFCS will no longer try to arrest your momentum as you fly around. Let me give you an example here. As I fly forward, I'm going to now go ahead and let go of my throttle. And you'll see the ship is still maintaining speed. I am still at 224 meters per second. And I will continue to go this direction. For the most part, I'm in atmosphere, so eventually the friction will slow me to nothing. But if I was in space, I would continue going on forever. Again, this can lead to some problems. As you can see here, I can rotate all the way around, but my ship is still traveling backwards. Until I give it forward throttle, now the ship will then go in that direction. This could be also a little bit dangerous if I fly towards a space station and I see something catches my eye and I look that way. I am no longer paying attention to the fact that I'm flying towards the space station. My recommendation is, if you are a newer pilot, to keep it back on coupled mode. Again, that hotkey is C on your keyboard. So now, as I fly forward once more as a demonstration, and then I let go of my throttle output, you'll see that my ship is now slowly going to be coming to a stop, as IFCS is now going to arrest all momentum and bring me to a hover. The next indicator in this cluster is ESP, and that stands for Enhanced Stick Precision. That's really more for combat. But what it does is, once you have a target locked and you start to put your nose onto the target, IFCS will start to minimize the output of the thrusters on your ship to ensure that you have smooth targeting capabilities. Without IFCS, your ship's nose may be a little bit twitchy and very, very hard and basically very unresponsive because of how twitchy the actual thruster firing output is. With IFCS, it slows your target acquisition. Once you start to draw your crosshair onto the target, it slows the inputs down and basically adjusts the sensitivity of it. Now, there is no way to turn it off. You can turn it off in the configurations panel. We'll talk about it here, but you can't turn it off with a hotkey at all unless you create a custom hotkey. My recommendation is leave it on, especially if you're a more rookie pilot. And lastly, we have lock. You can hit right shift on your keyboard to lock your pitch and yaw capabilities. As you see here, I have it locked and my ship is no longer responsive to pitch and yaw. I can still roll and I can still strafe. However, my pitch and yaw are now locked in. This is great if you want to travel in a straight line without any erroneous input, or if you're doing something like mining or salvaging and you're a little bit annoyed by erroneous mouse inputs that could cause things to get thrown off. Don't forget that if you lock that, you're not going to be able to fly the ship properly anymore. So make sure you hit that right shift and you pay attention to that indicator again so you have control over your pitch and yaw once more. Alright, so you have some keybinds under your belt and you know the basics of the flight HUD. Let's start putting this stuff into practice and going over basic flight as well as takeoff and landings. But first I need to power on my ship. There's two ways you can do it. You can hold F on your keyboard and you can look around here until you find the flight ready option here. Or you can hit Alt plus R on your keyboard. That's Alt plus Romeo. And your ship will default on to SCM mode, by the way, when you first spawn it. Now we're ready for takeoff here. It's very simple. All I need to do is look around, make sure I'm clear. Okay, I know I have something above me, so I have to be aware of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit spacebar to lift up and get ready to take off. But before I do that, I want to make sure I'm not going too fast. When your gear is down, Star Citizen will limit your speed to 30 meters per second. But for some people, that could be a little bit too fast, especially if you're a little bit greener under the gills. So you may want to limit your speed even more. In this case here, I'm going to go ahead and reduce my speed limiter a little bit lower. You can go 14 and you can go even lower than that. And I'm going to go probably right around there. Let's do that. Just one notch down. So it's super slow. Now I'm going to hold spacebar. And then I'm going to let go and come to a hover. Great. Now we are ready to go. I'm going to hit N on my keyboard to raise my gear. That's N as in November. There we go. Great. Now I'm no longer limited to 30 meters per second. I have full speed, but I need to get out of here. So you'll notice I have my limiter set down. I don't want to crash into anything, so I'm keeping my speed limited here. So let's go ahead and push on out. There we go. Let's clear the rest of this floating station here. Perfect. Now I can open my speed limiter here all the way to the max, and we are ready for flight. And it's that simple. Now I'm going to go ahead and begin traveling down to the stations down below on the ground. So I'm going to hold B as in Bravo on my keyboard to switch to nav mode. Wait for my quantum drive to spool up. Once it's fully spooled up, my ship has full access to its full speed. So now we can head down here. And let's look for some of the facilities that are down here, shall we? Looks like we have one there, and we have a bridge. That bridge looks like a good landing spot. It's nice and open, right? Let's go ahead and move on in. Now, obviously, I don't want to go too fast, so I'm going to bring it back to SCM. To slow myself down, and then I'm going to go ahead and now pull the gear out. And you'll notice my ship is going to slow down to a crawl now. And there we are. We are now limited at 30 meters per second. At this point, I can choose to limit it even less if I want to. So I can go down here and bring in that one notch there. And now I can line myself up over the target area that I want to land at. This seems nice. Now, obviously, I can't see below me. We're supposed to get a landing camera at somewhere later on in the game. We don't know when, but CIG is supposed to be making a landing camera, but we don't have one yet. So instead, what we're going to use is what's known as third person. I'm going to hit F4 on my keyboard to go into third person. While in third person, I can hold Z on my keyboard. That's Z as in Zulu. And I can rotate with my mouse. And this allows me to orbit my camera around so I can look around. I'm also looking around with track IR here. You may not obviously have head tracking. So if I turn my head tracking off, this is what it would look like for you. As you can see here, I can easily see that I'm very clear in my landing spot. So now I'm going to go ahead and hold down Control to descend, and I'm going to do it nice and gentle here. I can tap it if I want to be a little bit careful as I come down, and touchdown. I can now hit F4 plus star on my numpad to reset my camera on my third person. And then I can hit F4 again to go back into first person. And there we go. The third person camera is really, really useful if you're a little bit of a rookie. As you get better, you may want to start trying to practice doing it in first person. I'll show you what that means. So I'm going to go ahead and launch and pull my gear up. Let's open the limiter. And then let's do a loop and come back down. The way I usually like to land and teach new players to land in first person is just to make sure you're angling your cockpit in the direction you want to go. In this case, I want to land right here, so I'm going to pull my gear down. And you'll see I'm pointing myself directly at where I want to go. Looking good, looking clear. Let's go ahead and rotate now. Then we hold control and down we go. We already checked that it was clear. It is perfectly clear. So now all we have to do is just land it.
Landing complete.
Simple as that. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is I want to show you one element that I have not talked about with the HUD yet, but now it's going to be super important for just flight, takeoff, and landing. You'll notice this little guy here flying around in the center up here. This guy right here, right? We like to call that the meatball. What it really is the vector indicator. This is telling me where my ship is actually ending up in space and where it's going to go as time goes on. What that means is it's telling me where my ship is going. In this case, if I point it, let's say I'm going to actually decouple because it's actually a lot easier for me to show you how this works. So I'm going to point it now over here at these rocks. If I now travel in a straight line and then I rotate my view, you'll notice that the vector indicator is now lined up with that side of the hill. And if I keep going here, I'm going to eventually crash into the side of this hill. The vector indicator is very, very handy for telling you where your ship is going to end up. And if I go back to coupled and I fly towards the ground and I pull up, you'll see that there's a little bit of lag because it takes a little bit of moment for the thrusters to overcome the mass of the ship, especially when you're trying to change direction. This little guy here is invaluable when you're trying to fly around, say, for example, close to the ground here, or when I'm trying to take off or land. So, bringing it back to landing, let's go back to that bridge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a spot. Let's actually do it by the radar dish out here. This seems like a cool spot to land out here. Let's find a nice open spot. This spot right here looks good. I'm going to point it right where I want to go. Right there. There we go. Fly towards it. Let's pull our gear down. There we go. And now let's hit control. Let's rotate and bring it down. Simple as that. Now, let's do decoupled. Decoupled is one of the most fun ways you can land in Star Citizen, but it does take a little bit of practice to get used to. So, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to hit C on my keyboard to decouple. And now I'm going to pick a nice spot to land. Now, I do know there's some garages out here. Right there is good. Now I'm going to go ahead and point my vector indicator right on where I want to land. Perfect. Right there. Now I'm going to just rotate. Lined up with the horizon, I'm going to now pull my gear down. You'll notice my ship is still going in a downwards pattern because I'm decoupled. IFCS is no longer going to arrest my ship's momentum. And there we go. As we come in, I'm going to go ahead and stop. Boom. Now, I came in a little bit rough there, right? Because I was maintaining my original momentum. So we're probably going to want to stop a little bit faster than that so we don't have a rougher landing. And that is where space brake comes in. So let's do that one more time. And we're going to instead use space brake this time. Space brake is IFCS trying to arrest your momentum. By default, space brake will always basically behave like coupled mode. Now currently, I have my settings set to allow space brake to engage my boost. And by default, it won't do that. In fact, I'm actually going to turn that off. And I'll come back to this here in a second because I want to show you guys what this does. But for now, I'm going to turn this off to show you what happens when I hit space brake. Now you'll notice I'm going to hit the space brake key, which is X on your keyboard. That's X as in X-ray. If I hit that, my ship is now going to come to a stop. I'm coupled right now, right? So if I let go of my throttle, my ship is going to keep going. I hold X, and my ship is now going to come to a stop. And there we go. It's essentially like turning on a temporary coupled mode. Now let's do that demonstration of landing again. I'm going to look towards those garages. Let's bring it around. And I'm now going to point towards where I want to land. And line things up, controlled. There we go. This looks good. This looks like a nice spot right here. I'm going to now rotate. Let's go into third person. Let's now wait until I get a little bit closer. I'm going to pull the gear down now. Perfect. Now I'm going to go ahead and hold X to slow my ship down. I can let go and just kind of feather it, tap X here and there a little bit, and touchdown. Way smoother than last time. Now, I talked about how my space brake engages boost, and what that means is when I hold down my space brake, it actually fires the thrusters with boost. So it is actually a lot more powerful at slowing your ship down. And I have to actually enable that in the configurations page, so that's what I want to talk about next, is the configurations page. Now, when you are looking through your MFDs, there's these little arrows down here that you can click, and you want to go to the configurations page, and you have a whole slew of options here, and I'll get to all of them. The first one is the most obvious, coupled, decoupled, right? I already showed you the hotkey, but you can enable it and disable it here. The next that's interesting is cruise control. So on the speed tape, when I activate cruise control, you'll notice the speed tape is going to be a little bit different. You'll see now that I have a C on my throttle output, and that tells me that I have cruise control on. Cruise control, think of it as like an auto run in any other MMO. You engage it, and then your ship will continue to move forward in that direction indefinitely until you run out of fuel. And it's kind of interesting, so let's go over it. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some forward throttle, and then I'm going to let go. And you'll see it's not my full SCM speed. This is because cruise control will latch to whatever throttle setting you have it set to. So I can go to my max SCM and have it latch to my maximum SCM, or I could have it latch to a very, very low speed setting. So that's how cruise control works. If I want to enable cruise control through a hotkey, it's Alt plus C on your keyboard. That's C as in Charlie. I can turn it off, and I can turn it back on. Keep mind of this icon. I cannot tell you how many players I've seen die because they left cruise control on, or they accidentally turned it on while they were in flight. So keep an eye on that icon. Also, be mindful that cruise control only works in coupled mode. It does not work in decoupled mode. The next is gravity compensation. By default, IFCS will always compensate for gravity when you're in atmosphere. This is the reason why I can hover. When I turn it off, IFCS will no longer compensate for gravity, and my ship will start to sink. You actually notice my true vector indicator down there, my vector meatball, actually went down. So as I fly forward, and I line up with the horizon here, I'll still maintain level flight, but the moment I let go of throttle, you're going to see that the ship is now going to start to go down. Now, obviously, I'm not going to crash because I am in coupled mode, so IFCS is eventually just going to come to a hover, because it's always going to try to arrest momentum, although we are losing slight altitude by 1 meter per second. If I now switch to decoupled mode, you'll see the ship starts to sink like a rock, and that is because in decoupled mode, IFCS is no longer in any way trying to arrest my momentum. It is now instead trying to just follow my inputs, and that is it. So if I fly in a straight line here, you'll notice the meatball is now sagging, and I'm actually losing altitude despite the fact that I'm aiming at the horizon. I would have to actually raise my nose up here and align it somewhat with the horizon in order to maintain level flight, or I can apply some upward strafe. So I really have to babysit my ship a lot more in this mode. Now, why would you want to turn off gravity compensation? It's more for advanced pilots. Some pilots just don't like when IFCS is doing things for them. They want to control the ship entirely on their own. You being possibly a rookie pilot, you probably don't need it. So you probably should just keep on gravity compensation. Just leave it on. Don't turn it off. Otherwise, you may end up finding you're crashing into the ground a lot more because you don't realize your ship is sinking like a rock. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Me personally, I leave it on. There's very, very few times I'll have it off. Like when I'm racing, I'll usually turn it off or something like that. But for 90% of the time I play the game, I keep gravity compensation on just because I like having it on. The next is called auto slowdown. Auto slowdown is what slows your ship down when the gear comes down. Like I said before, when you have your gear down, by default, your ship will be locked to 30 meters per second. Some pilots, especially more advanced pilots, don't like this. They want to have the full speed available to them. So you can turn auto slowdown off, and now I have full SCM speed unlocked for me while I have my gear down. In the future, we will be able to overspeed our gear and destroy it. So that's more of like a safety feature. But currently right now, some players just don't like the idea of their ship automatically slowing down when their gear is already down. So you can enable it and disable it here. Next is G-Save. By default, G-Save is always on, but you can turn it off here. And this means that you can do much more tighter, crazier maneuvers even without boost, but you run the risk of G-locking your pilot, so you'll manually need to avoid G-locking your pilot in high G maneuvers. Now I'm in atmosphere here, so I'm not really going to pull too hard on my Gs, even if I engage boost here. And you'll notice that my pilot is doing just fine. And now we can do 14.3 Gs in real life. That would turn any pilot into mush, but this is a fantasy star sci-fi goofy game. We're capable of doing this just fine. Now, let me give you a demonstration of how this looks. So now I have nav mode enabled. Now I'm going to boost. And then I'm going to show you what it's like when I come to a stop. Now that I'm in space. Now I'm going to hit coupled to slow myself down. I'm now pulling 13 Gs. Let's go ahead and engage space brake. Slowing down to a crawl. There we go. You can see that the colors kind of dipped out there. Now let's see here. If I go into a maneuvering pattern around this station, I have G-Safe off, so I have to be very careful. Let's go ahead and do some maneuvering here. Switch back to SCM. And you can hear my character breathing heavy. So far, we're doing okay. No issues so far. Give some boost. And I'm going to continue to push my pilot to their limits. And I'm kind of reaching the limits here. My pilot is blacking out. Now I have to actually fight to keep my pilot from blacking out. I have to actually maneuver against my own ship. Now, if I have G-Safe on, my ship will automatically adjust throttle outputs to ensure I don't G-lock, but without it, I have to do it manually. Alright. Next, boost disables G-Safe. This is usually on by default, and that just means that when I engage the boost, G-Safe will automatically turn off if it's not already off. Very simple. Highly recommend you leave this on because you want to make sure that your ship is at full power potential when you're boosting. Now, space brake enables boost. I like having this on, and I recommend that you have it on as well too. When you engage space brake, again, that's with X on your keyboard, X-ray, that will enable boost to slow you down to a stop. So you're going to slow down to a stop a lot faster with your space brake, all at the cost of boost, of course. Highly recommend you have that on. Next, we have enable ESP. I recommend you keep this on. Again, this is for enhanced stick precision. Leave this on, otherwise you're going to find that you're going to be having a hard time targeting enemies in a dogfight. Now the next one is interesting. This is known as proximity assist. What this means is the slower you are and the closer you are to an object nearby, the lower the output and sensitivity of your ship as you get closer and closer to that item. So as I get close to this starship, or space station I mean, the sensitivity of my ship and its throttle outputs and all my inputs starts to slow down. This is to ensure that I have maximum precision as I get close to these really tight spaces here, right? Now I can turn off proximity assist to disable that behavior, and now I have to manage all that by myself, but I can go much faster around these objects, and I have to be a lot careful. I can actually go faster. You can hear my character breathing harder because my ship is now working at full capacity, and this is entirely on me, the pilot here, controlling the ship and trying to stay close to this ring here. This is also really handy if you want to do what's known as low flying. Low flying is, just as it sounds, when you want to fly close to the ground, as close as you possibly can, and is handy for when you want to duck between other types of geological features such as canyons, mountains, hills, anything like that. If you have proximity assist on, it's going to slow your ship down and slow your input, so you may not like that. And you can turn off the proximity assist to ensure that you can fly through all these tight spaces without IFCS getting in the way. Now, by default, I recommend you keep proximity assist on. Only if you're a rookie pilot, you may opt to turn this off later as you get some more flight time under your belt. All right, let's take a look at the next one. We have the speed limiter. It's self-explanatory. You can turn off the speed limiter if you don't intend to use it. It's more handy for joystick and throttle pilots since you don't need the speed limiter necessarily. You can manage it. In this case, I'm using 2 sticks and my left stick controls my throttle output. I don't really need a limiter because my stick is the limiter, so I don't need it. But if you're on mouse and keyboard, that limiter is a godsend, so you may want to opt to keep that on and not turn it off. And the last one is to enable your headlights. All starships in the games have headlights attached to them. You can enable it there, but obviously there's a hotkey, and that is L on your keyboard or Lima, and you can cycle between those. Okay, so we've talked about now basic controls, the HUD, as well as the configuration status page to enable some other types of configuration stuff on here that you may want to look through to get a little bit more out of your flight. Next, I want to talk about the annunciator panels. So you see these little squares up here. These are the annunciator panels, and these are various miscellaneous status indicators based on your ship. Here we have the power indicator. This is just letting me know how the power plant is operating. In this case, it's operating optimally. If it was yellow or red, that means there's issues with my power output with my power plant. Next, we have the weapon status indicator, and as you can see, it's yellow, and that's because my weapons are not fully powered here on my power page. And I've done that, and you can see the status indicator is no longer saying that there's an issue. Next, we have thrust output. If there's any issues with my thrust output, whether it's yellow or red, it will show up here. In this case, my ship is operating optimally, so I have no problems. Same with the shield status indicator. If I have any issues with the shields, it will show up here. Sometimes you may see it show up yellow. That just means it's not fully powered, meaning you have some leftover power you could potentially put in it. Or it is underpowered in this case. Optimal power here, in this case on the Gladius, is 3 pips. If I go below 3 pips, it's no longer optimally powered, and you'll see it turns yellow. Next, we have coolers, and you can see the coolers are not optimally powered. That's why they're showing yellow here. If I scroll over to the coolers here, it's showing that it's actually fully powered. This is one of the weird things with Star Citizen right now. Sometimes you'll see things say it's not optimally powered when it is. Sometimes that's a bug or a lag or any kind of weird desync issue with the server. Sometimes you can turn certain things off to enable that. In this case, I could turn off my radar if I wanted to and power it on here, and you see it goes away. But I kind of need my radar, especially if I was going to do some combat, right? So I'm going to repower my radar on, and there you see it says I have issues. So my coolers are not 100% working at full capacity. I could say take power away from my engines, put it into my coolers, and there you go. Next, we have the quantum status indicator. Currently, I'm in SCM, so my quantum drive's not active, so that's why it's grayed out. But when I switch to nav mode, you'll see the quantum status indicator is now lit up, showing that my drive is online. If it shows yellow or red, that means there's an issue with the drive. It could be that the drive is damaged or just having all kinds of issues, or it could be even out of fuel. Next is radar. As I showed before, if I turn off the radar now, you'll see the radar is now disengaged. If I have problems with the radars, for example, if it's damaged or whatnot, you'll see that it shows yellow or red. Hey, this is Hybrid in the editing bay here. I also forgot to mention that the radar indicator will light up when someone is also targeting you as well. It will flash red, letting you know that someone or something is targeting you. Remember that it is good etiquette to not target someone, otherwise that could be considered a hostile action. If someone is targeting you, whether it's an AI or a player, that radar indicator will light up and let you know someone is targeting you. Prox stands for proximity assist. As I get close to elements on the ground here, you'll see that it lights up and you'll hear a small chime. That's your proximity assist warning. Now in your options page, I go escape, options, audio, and you'll see it says down here, It says ship computer verbosity. By default, it's high. If I switch it to full, the ship's computer will actually also alert me to proximity alerts. You'll notice that it has yellow and red. Yellow means that you're on a collision course. Red means that you're about to crash. And when you hear the ship's voice come over the comms like that, that's basically the the critical alert that you're about to crash. I'm on a collision course, and when it turns red, I need to maneuver. There you go. Next is the hit status indicator, and that can be a little bit deceiving. You might think it means I'm getting hit, or it means that you're hitting the target. What it actually means is that a hostile is firing upon you. In combat, this button will actually light up red, and when it lights up red, that means someone is actively shooting at you. Now, that doesn't mean they might be hitting you, it just means someone is shooting at you with their guns. So the radar is picking up that you're taking incoming fire, and this will light red to let you know you are taking incoming fire. Really, really handy to know when you are flying around and not paying attention to what's going on around you. Maybe you see another player ship, or you see AI ships and you're trying to ignore them. Maybe you're doing salvaging, or you're just doing something else. If you see that hit indicator light up, that means someone is actively shooting at you and you need to do evasive maneuvers. Next is the missile status indicator, and this shows you when incoming missiles are about to arrive and hit you. When you are getting locked on, this will turn yellow, and then when you are getting fired upon, it will turn red, as well as you'll hear in-game warnings letting you know that missiles are on the way. And on the top center of the HUD, you'll see an indicator showing you that a missile's on the way, the type of seeker head the missile is, and how long you have before it smashes into your face and blows you up. Alright, so this covers all the elements of HUD and controls when it comes to the basics in Star Citizen. I know it's quite a lot to take in. Star Citizen has a lot of information to convey. But trust me when I say that once you learn it, it's relatively simple and straightforward. And of course, if there's anything that kind of confuses you or you need to go back and review it, by all means go back earlier in the video and review it. The next thing I want to talk about is the basic principles of flight itself, and in this case atmosphere, because atmospheric flight is different from space flight. In atmosphere, ships fly like planes, how you would expect. However, don't expect a ship to automatically bank like they would in real life. Star Citizen doesn't have a full fluid simulation for its atmospheric planets. Instead, it's kind of a arcadey style system that is based on reality to some degree. Ships do have actual lift, and in this case here in the PTO, you'll notice my ship actually has control surfaces. Now, in this current version of the game, the control surfaces are just there visually, they don't do anything, but in later versions of the game, they are expected to actually function. However, it's still not a full fluid simulation, so some elements are kind of truncated to kind of make it for accessibility. In this case, some things here that you would expect to see in a flight sim are available. For example, you'll notice as I'm turning, I'm constantly banking a lot. Now, you could turn like a starship if you wanted to by just simply yawing, and you'll notice that the ship does not like it when you do that. It can do it, but it really hates that you're doing that. And in fact, if I do it in decoupled mode here, and I give myself a bit more speed by engaging nav mode here, you'll notice that my ship really, especially as I gain more speed, does not like me trying to yaw. As you can see here, I am at full yaw, and my ship is not having it. It does not want to do it. So what do you want to do instead? You want to bank into your turns. Now, it's not like an actual flight sim. If I bank here, my ship is not automatically going to turn in that direction, right? I have to actually bank and pull my stick. And you can see now I can make a much sharper turn than if I used my yaw. And there you go. And this is important to know when you're flying in atmosphere. A lot of people will tend to try to fly like they're in space. And like I said, that's not going to happen. Your ship is going to really hate you. So for example, let's say I wanted to land down here and I want to fly like a spaceship. Okay, I'm just going to rotate. And I am now fighting my controls here to try to get my ship to rotate so I can bring it over here. And now I'm all over the place. It's not good. Fly it like a plane. So in this case, if I wanted to land down there again, I'm going to roll, pull around, bring it around town, and then get ready for my landing sequence. Wait for my vector indicator. There we go. And now we are ready for my landing sequence. I'm going to go ahead and slow down. Wait till I get close to the ground. And I'm going to pull my gear out. And there we go, smooth as butter. And that's the basics of flight. Just remember also, if you fly backwards, your ship is also going to hate you as well too. So the more I fly backwards here at high speed, eventually my ship is going to hate my guts. Now in SCM, it's not too bad because SCM is meant to be the best combat maneuvering that you could possibly have. But the moment I do this in nav mode and I start to pick up speed, watch as my drive fully spools up here, you're going to notice my ship is going to start to hate me the more speed I pick up here. Let's actually give it some boost just to show you. And the ship is going to start to nose over, and there we go. And there we go. And the ship noses over. So you can fly backwards. It's 100% doable. It just won't allow you to do it too fast. And in later iterations of Star Citizen, if you're watching this video way down the line, there's also going to be overheating of thrusters. And like I said, these control surfaces are also going to be key as well. Because the way it's going to work is you're mostly going to have your main engines firing, and then you're going to have your control surfaces. You're not going to be using your maneuvering thrusters. Mostly because they will overheat a lot more in atmosphere, and they will use a lot more fuel. So you would only want to use them in an emergency, or if you were coming in for landing. But currently in Star Citizen, we don't have that yet, so your thrusters are the main way you're going to be flying around in atmosphere. Alright, let's go ahead and go into space and talk about flight in space, shall we? Now in space, you have a lot more freedom here. Obviously, I can yaw to my heart's content, and I won't have any problems with atmospheric drag, even at this altitude here where I'm technically still in atmosphere. However, the principles of flight still apply here, and the reason why is every starship in Star Citizen, the bottom thrusters are some of the most powerful thrusters in the game. Now, obviously, the mains are the most powerful, but the bottom thrusters themselves are probably the second most powerful combined thrusters in the game. So with that in mind, when you're doing complex maneuvers, or especially if you're in a dogfight, you're going to still want to roll and pitch into your targets, or when you're trying to do maneuvers. Always try to avoid over yawing or over rolling into your targets. You always want to make sure that you have everything in pitch. In this case, let's say that this station is an enemy fighter and he's flying over me. Well, now instead of yawing towards him, which will take me forever because my yaw thrusters are not the greatest on any ship really, except for some of the alien ships. Instead, if I want to get better maneuverability, I'm going to want to roll and pitch towards him. And I'm right on him now. You can see how fast, especially with boost. A lot of people will also recommend that you always keep the target in pitch in terms of verticality. Because if I try to chase a target that's below my HUD in this case, the top thrusters are not as powerful. So me getting my nose on target, not the quickest compared to, for example, let's go upside down here. If I went like this. Especially when you engage boost. So if I did it here, let's say the target's below me, and now I'm just going to nose down. Overdid it. There we go. Now let's flip it around. Holding boost and bring it up, and you can see how much faster I can rip it around. And this is more true for the heavier ships. So if you have a medium or a heavy fighter, you want to rely on those bottom thrusters and main thrusters a lot more. It's going to give you a lot more maneuverability. Light fighters can get away with doing some real crazy stuff. Alright, I'm going to head now into the persistent universe because I want to start talking about how to do quantum travel both with your star map and free flight quantum travel while in game. So I'll see you in the black here shortly. Alright, I'm in the persistent universe right now here at my hangar. My hangar may be larger than yours. This is an extra large hangar. This is my home hangar. All you need to know is once you spawn your ship and it's on the deck, it is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into my ship and get things started here. One of the main things you'll want to pay attention to is where your hangar doors are. In this case, mine are going to be above. If you're in a small hangar, sometimes the hangars could actually be off to the sides in front of you. So you need to be able to identify where the hangar doors are before you take off so you know where to go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pop into the seat here and get things kicked off. Like I demonstrated earlier in the video, you're going to want to hold F and you're going to want to find the button for turning your ship on. You can either do that with Flight Ready or you can hit Alt plus R, that is Alt plus Romeo on your keyboard to do the same. And there we go. Our ship is now powered on and we are ready to fly at this moment. But we have a few other housekeeping things we'll need to take care of. First off, you need to make sure that in those settings we talked about in the MFDs, we want to go to the configurations page. And you want to make sure that your settings are set according to what you like. Right? Remember we talked about coupled, auto slowdown, all these features. Adjust it to taste. Remember that if you change the settings in your game settings, it will always be universal to every ship that you get into, but some ships you may decide you want to have something more custom. So for example, with my Cutlass, I like to fly decoupled, and I also like to have some of the other safeties turned off, just because I feel like I fly the best with a lot of the safeties turned off. You can also adjust additional HUD features here, such as the advanced HUD, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the flight a little bit later. But for now, just keep in mind that there's a tab up here, there's gunnery, and then there's HUDs. You can have different tabs up here. This tab here is for the more advanced HUD. Like I said, we'll talk about that shortly. But for now, make sure that you do a little bit of housekeeping if you don't have your game settings already set up. Great. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually contact the ATC before we start taking off here. Now there's a couple ways we could do this. For one, we can go to the communications page here on one of our MFDs. Any MFD will do. And you'll see it says the current landing services for the area you're at. In this case, I'm at Area 18, and this is the landing services. All I have to do is click that button, and it will hail ATC, and then the doors will automatically open. Now, if there's a lot of traffic in the area and a lot of players are coming and going, you may get put into a queue, so you may have to wait a little bit. Now, there's another way you can do it. You can hit F11 on your keyboard to open up your comms page on your mobiGlas. You're going to want to go to the Friends tab on the top left, and you'll see the Area 18 services there as well. And you'll want to click this little triangle, and that does the exact same thing as you saw on the MFD. And then, of course, there is a hotkey, and that hotkey is Alt plus N on your keyboard, and that will do the same thing. And you'll notice there I'm in a hangar queue, so this area is pretty busy today, so I have a queue. That means one person is ahead of me. Now, it will say estimated wait time 100 seconds, 200 seconds, 300 seconds. That's just the generic number. It doesn't actually mean how long it takes. It really only comes down to how long it takes the other players to get out of their hangars and free up a hangar for you to get out of. Now, this is going to be very important because that means there's going to be a lot of traffic in the airspace. So what I'm going to teach you here is to make you a little bit safer as you fly around, because I don't want you crashing into other players. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to set myself up for flight here. And I'll just switch to the power page and give myself a little bit more juice for the engines. Now we are going to be ready here, and that notification went away, so that means my turn is going to be up next. Now, one of the things I always recommend is you pull your limiter down. Remember, left Alt plus mouse wheel to pull your limiter down, and the Cutlass has like a little bit of a mechanical limiter you can see there. And I can pull it all the way down, but I'm going to do one notch over, right? Now I'm going to wait for these doors to open, and I'm already ready to take off. Once I am ready here, I can observe my surroundings with F4. Remember, with F4 and then holding Z on my keyboard here to rotate around, and I can see my surroundings, and I can see that the door is opening up. Fantastic. We are going to be ready to launch here. Now, one thing I mentioned earlier in the video is if your ship has VTOL capabilities, you can utilize them here for a better takeoff or landing experience. In this case, I can hit K on my keyboard to rotate my thrusters downward, and that's going to give me a big boost of energy as I take off, as you'll see here shortly. All right, hangar request is complete. I am ready to take off here. I'm looking up, making sure there's nothing above me. We are clear. I'm going to go ahead now and hold spacebar. Here we are, and now I can tap N on my keyboard to raise my gear. Gear is coming up. And we are out of the hangar. Simple as that. Now pay attention to what you see around you. I'm going to go ahead and turn off VTOLs, by the way, so I can fly around normally. You see how that person has their name over there? That's another player. And if you don't see names or you want to be aware of other players that are around you, you can hit Tab on your keyboard, and Tab will do a pulse, and you'll get radar pingbacks, including player names if they are at player ships. For example, that's a player right there. We saw this player is coming in for landing over here. That's a player over there that is taking off. And it's important to see these radar contacts because you don't want to crash into anybody when you're taking off or landing. This is also important for your radar, which we talked about briefly earlier in the video. You'll see radar contacts on here. Now there's a small distance that this radar can see. So as you can see, I can see a player on my pingback right here. I can see this player in their Carrack taking off, but they don't actually show up on radar until I get a little bit closer. So that's kind of like a nice warning system here. And actually, there you go. See, they pop right up. At about sub 1 kilometer, you'll see them actually show up on radar. So if you do see radar contact show up on your radar, that means somebody's pretty close to you. Some type of ship or object, whatever it is very close to you. So be very careful as you maneuver and make sure you don't crash into them. And again, that tab pulse, hitting tab to pulse out, is very crucial for identifying ships around you, because your passive radar may not pick up those ships. Look at all these other ships here, right? And after a few seconds here, all of these contacts will disappear from my radar, because now it's back to my passive radar. And then when I hit tab to pulse out, you see I can extend the range of my radar very temporarily, and I can see all these contacts around me. Very useful, especially if you're worried about other players in the area. You just don't want to run into them. All right, now we're going to get into the navigation portion of this tutorial. We've talked about the basic flight mechanics, how a starship flies, the HUD elements, and some keybinds. Now we're going to talk about actually navigating around the verse in Star Citizen. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go up to the station. So I'm at Area 18, so I need to get to what's known as Bajini Point. So I need to go ahead and go up there, and it's up there. You can kind of see it right there, that bright blinking red light. That is the space station in orbit of ArcCorp, and I need to get over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold B on my keyboard. That's going to switch us to nav mode, and you're going to see a bunch of icons appear on the screen. So let's go ahead and do that now. Here we go. All those icons are points of interest, destinations that you can travel to. In this case, you can see that if I hover my nose right over Bajini Point, I am now looking at Bajini Point, and I can actually start to make my way there. However, you'll notice a warning on the center of my screen there that says disabled in atmosphere. What that's talking about is my quantum drive. Obviously, 234 kilometers away, that's a long distance. Even with my limiter now fully unlocked, it's going to take me quite a while to get there. I'm going to be slow boating for quite a while. So what I'm going to want to do instead is quantum travel, which will bump my speeds up a little bit closer to the speed of light and get me there much faster. But you'll see it says disabled in atmosphere. That means the quantum drive is disabled in atmosphere. Here we go. I am now at a nice distance up, and you'll notice that my calibration initiated. My drive is now spooled up. At this point, I can now left click my mouse to engage the drive, and it will automatically send me to Bajini Point and stop me at the correct distance. So let's do that. And there we go. We are now at Bajini Point, and we have control over our ship. Now, as we head in, we can choose to turn off the drive we want to, but I'm going to keep it on because I want to have my full speed as I travel. So I'm going to come towards the station. Now you'll notice I'm pointing my true vector indicator, my VI, away from the station. This is in case my game lags out, my game crashes, something happens. I know that I'm not flying at the space station. I can come to a stop at any time, especially when I get control back of my ship. Now that we're flying over the station, I'm going to hold B again to switch to SCM mode, and this will disengage the quantum drive and allow me to slow down and back to SCM speeds and give me more control over my ship. Now, we're going to call the station here because we want to land at this station. We can do all the same methods I talked about. We can do the MFD, we can do the comms page in your mobiGlas, or you can use the hotkey. In this case, I'm going to use the hotkey once more. Alt plus N, that's N as in November. And we will then be given a hangar. It could take a few seconds. It depends on whether the server is a little bit laggy. It also depends on whether the servers are, or I should say the hangars themselves are occupied or players are taking off or landing at that moment. So you may be put into a queue like we saw earlier when I was taking off. You'll still get queues even when you're trying to land. In this case, we have our landing location assigned to us. So we're going to head straight to that location now. And remember, if you're ever not looking at it, it's going to be off to the edge. You'll see right over there on the right side of the screen, right? You'll see that little marker that tells you where the hangar location is. So we're going to head that way. And I'm going to go ahead and reorient myself here. There we are. We are lined up. Now, I'm flying decoupled. I'm a little bit more advanced at flying. But again, all the principles that I've told you guys earlier in this video are all identical. Everything here is all the same. You're going to want to make sure that you line up your landing spot. And you're going to use that vector indicator, that little meatball right there. You're going to use that to line up where you want to land at. So I'm going to go right above the pad. Once I'm above the pad, I'm going to back off on my speed. And if you are in coupled mode, you may opt to nose down a little bit. Me, personally, I like to stay with the horizon because I'm decoupled right now. And then I'm going to bring my gear down. I'm going to use my VTOL. It's not necessary here, but I like doing it just for fun. And then we are going to touch down. I just hit control and just tapped it ever so slightly to bring it down. Very simple, very gentle. The main thing you always want to remember is you come into the hangar, whether it's a vertical or side-on hangar, you want to make sure you're above it. You're nice and level above the pad, and then you bring it down. You could do a little bit more advanced stuff with decoupled, but for now, I know most of you watching this are probably going to be coupled pilots. So my recommendation is you fly, you hover over the pad until you're a nice level, you're aligned with the pad. Remember, you can go into third person. You can check to see if your alignment is good or not. I did it all in first person just because I've done this a lot. I'm very experienced. I've been flying in Star Citizen for many, many years now. But as a rookie for yourself, you're going to want to maybe potentially use third person initially, and then as you get better, you can try to work on your first person landings. Once you're aligned over the pad, you then control and you bring it down. Don't forget to use your speed limiter as well too. Your speed limiter is super key here. Now I have mine turned off, even though I was using it earlier, but I was using it as an example to show you guys that you can use it to limit your speed. If I re-enable it here, let's go back to my configurations page. And I re-enable my speed limiter. I always have mine off because I'm a dual stick user, but again, for you as a potential rookie, I highly recommend you keep it on and you don't turn it off. So now I have my limiter on. If I raise up, right, and I go up, you can see I can, even with the VTOLs on, I'm a little bit fast. But you see how crazy fast it is, but it still helps control my speed. And in fact, let me turn VTOLs off so you can see it with normal liftoff capabilities. And you can see how much slower the ship is. Much more responsive, and I can bring it all the way down to the point where it stops being responsive. Just go one notch up, and there you go. I have control over it again. Now let me go ahead and reorient myself here, because we're going to take back off because we have more to talk about when it comes to navigation. Now, all right, so we are landed at our destination, but we need to possibly refuel, right? You're going to be going around all over the place in Star Citizen, and there is quantum fuel you're going to be consuming, and quantum fuel is a very, very important fuel that you're going to be needing to use a lot to get around the verse. Now, remember, if you don't remember where your quantum fuel indicators are, you have all your indicators the same as every other ship in the game, right? We talked about it. Here's my speed tape. Here's my afterburner systems, right? And then you're like, well, where is the quantum fuel? So sometimes you don't see it on here, right? And different parts of different ships don't all have like the same, cluster gauges and stuff like that, but they're kind of just put in different spots. Now, what I usually like to do, for example, if I'm in a Drake ship, I'll just switch to nav mode. And you'll see on the top left, my MFD cast now shows hydrogen and quantum fuel up there. However, if you're wearing a combat helmet, you're not going to see that information regardless. So instead, you may want to switch to the advanced HUD or extended HUD to get that information. Again, this is advanced for a reason. Let me switch back to SCM mode. And now I'm going to go to the HUD. And then you'll see it says advanced HUD, SCM, and nav, and then labels. So these two, let's go ahead and flip it on. You're going to watch and you're going to see the HUD completely change here. Bam. So now this is the advanced HUD. This is everything that you've already seen in any other HUD, the compact basic HUD, but it's now being applied to the front center up front display. So now you can see it at all times. So we can do a quick review, but it's all very self-explanatory. There's only a few things that are different here. So SCM gun. So this is our SCM and nav mode. This basically our master modes and our operator modes, right? Same as we used to. It's also down here as well on the basic HUD. And then this is telling me that I have ESP on right now, this little tiny icon. And actually, you'll see right here it says advanced HUD labels. You can actually enable that, and it will turn that into a label instead, and it says ESP. I usually prefer that over the icons because I sometimes get confused as to which icon is which. So you may prefer that. And in fact, actually, I'm going to turn this on for nav mode as well. All right, so, and then we have our fuel levels. I have 97% hydrogen fuel and 100% quantum fuel. As you quantum around the star system in Star Citizen, you're going to be chewing up a lot of quantum fuel, and we need to refuel, and that's what we're going to talk about here shortly. But first, let's get through this HUD. This right here, strafe indicator. All it shows is what I'm doing when I'm using strafe inputs, whether I'm strafing up, down, or strafing left or strafing right. Here we have the gear indicator. So this is all the same speed tape that we showed you earlier in the video. This is all identical. It's just in a vertical offset here. Then you have your pitch ladder, horizon marker. Everything is normal here. You have your afterburner capacitor information here. Your decoys and noise are all here. Your G indicators here. But we have a few new elements here. So you have your G indicator and then your peak G indicator. Apparently I was pulling 74 Gs at peak at one point. And then you have the G basically showing the direction of the Gs. So when I'm actually flying around, you'll see the G indicator actually here show where the G forces are being applied to on the ship. So if I'm pulling really hard on the stick and going upwards, you'll see the G goes down. And then if I'm pushing the stick forward, you'll see the G's go like in an upwards direction. And if, of course, I'm strafing really hard, you'll also see it offset to the left or right like that. Then you have this is RALT. This stands for radar altimeter. This is how far the radar can see the bottom of the ground. It says 6 meters here, but that's because I think it's probably centered line with the pilot. So I'm probably about maybe about 6 meters off the ground. That seems a little high to me, but yeah, so it's not 100% perfect, but all you need to know is it's showing you in meters how high you are off of the ground. We had the other one that would show kilometers, and it was kind of like a little tape that rolled down. And then you have one that's this radar altimeter is a little bit more accurate and giving you kind of a little bit more minute details on your current altitude. Then you have your VSI, your vertical sync indicator. So this is actually telling you how fast you're moving towards the ground, or if you're moving away from the ground. So if I'm moving towards the ground, this VSI would show in meters per second how fast I'm moving towards the ground. If I'm moving away from the ground, it would be a negative value. All you need to know is if this number is really high and you're pointed towards the ground, you're probably going to crash into the ground. That's all you need to know. This is a little bit more handy for landing, especially at night. The VSI is very, very handy for landing because it can be very difficult to see where you're going, even with your lights on. And you can sometimes get lost in how fast you're going towards the ground. So the vertical sync indicator is very, very handy for identifying how fast you're moving towards the ground. So really, really handy. Now, for this HUD, who is this actually for? Everybody. This HUD is actually fantastic. It is advanced only because it puts a lot more details on here, but also extends things out to the center HUD. I use it almost all the time. However, if you're doing a ship that is, or you're flying around in a ship that is non-combat, like let's say you're flying a prospector, or you're flying a mole, or just any general ship that's really not designed for combat, you probably don't need this HUD. This HUD is really, really, really important for combat pilots. It's good for everyone, but mostly combat pilots. When I fly combat ships, I always use the advanced HUD. I never ever use the basic HUD for combat because it just doesn't give me enough information up front when I'm trying to shoot people in the face. Now, when I'm doing hauling, for example, in my hull A, I don't need all this information. I don't need to know all of this. I need to have a clearer view because I don't want to crash into other ships. I don't want to crash into asteroids and stuff like that. So I usually like to have my view cleared out because as you see here, it is nice that it's up front, but it does cluster your front view. All right, so now all that spiel is out of the way. Let's actually get to refueling the ship because we do want to actually get some gas in us. Now, I'm just going to refuel hydrogen fuel. I'm going to show you how to do that here, and then I'll show you how to do quantum fuel when we get to our destination. So I'm going to hit F1 on my keyboard here real quick to open my Mobi glass. I'm going to go to where it says landing, this landing app down here. And then you'll see it has a bunch of options here. Now, I don't need to repair or restock, so no service is necessary. I haven't used too much of my quantum fuel, so I can't really do anything with that. However, we have used some hydrogen fuel, so we can spend 68 credits to get our fuel back up. So if any of these are lit up, you can spend some money to top them off. In this case, I topped off my hydrogen fuel, and we are now back up. Of course, even when I'm on the pad here with my engines on, I'm still consuming a tiny amount of hydrogen fuel. So let's go ahead now and move on to our next destination. So I showed you how to free jump. You turn on nav mode and you can point to a destination, and then you can engage your drive with the left click on your mouse to jump to that destination. But that could be a little bit annoying when, as you saw, that there was a lot of icons. There's a lot of clutter that gets in the way there. So maybe we want to pinpoint a destination we want to go to. And that's where we use the star map. So first, let's get out of this hangar, shall we? So I'm going to go ahead and call the hangar. I used Alt plus N. I also have this bound to my joystick as well too, so I just hit that button and it immediately calls things up. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and wait for the doors to fully extend. I always recommend you wait for the doors to fully open up, and the reason why is sometimes there could be some weird desync or issues with lag, and you never want to just rush out when the doors are not fully open yet because something bad can happen. It has definitely happened. I've seen it before. If you watch my takeoff and landing series that is very popular on this channel, you will know that I have definitely seen people crash into hangar doors before. All right, let's go ahead and lift up, gear up, and push our way out now. And here we are. All right. Let's go ahead now that we are out in space, come to a dead stop. And now I'm going to hit F2 on my keyboard to open our star map. Now, I want to get to Pyro, and in order to do that, I need to find the Pyro gateway. Now, I could zoom out with my mouse wheel, and I could try to find it, right? I can try looking through all of here, trying to find it. Obviously, it's right there, right? But instead of doing that, especially like, you know, with tons of different locations, if I go to Crusader, and I go to Daymar, there's a lot of locations on here, right? If I needed to get somewhere very specific on here, it could be a bit of a pain in the butt trying to figure out where things are. So that's where the top left you have a search function here. In this case, I need to get to the Pyro gateway. So I'm going to type in Pyro, and you'll see a bunch of options pop up here. I'm going to go to the Pyro gateway. I have it selected, and then I can now route it as my destination. And there we go. Now my quantum drive is having it routed to it, so that way my drive will automatically try to point to it. Another handy feature, which I won't show here, but I just do want you to know, is if you have a contract accepted, and that contract requires you to get somewhere, whether it's to do a bounty, or you're trying to do a hauling mission, or whatever, you will see on the right-hand side of your mobi-glass, you'll see your current contract, and the location it wants you to go to. You can click on that, and then you'll see you can actually route yourself to your contract's destination. So that's actually a handy feature if you're doing a mission. All right, so we are routed now. You can see how much fuel we have and how much fuel is going to be required for the trip. We're A-okay. We can do it easily in one go. So now we're going to hit F2 to close our mobi-glass. And now you'll see on the bottom left of the screen, you see that little marker that's indicating where I need to go. There we go. But I have to turn on my drive in order to get there. So I'm going to tap B. There we go. And my nose is now lined up and I am ready to move on. We are now calibrated. We are now spooled. All I have to do is hold left click and away we go. Now, travel times vary depending on the type of quantum drive you have. And if you want to identify what your travel time is expected to be, you can hit F2 once more. And you'll see right here, it says my current location to Pyro Gateway is going to take me about 1 minute and 52 seconds. So 2 minutes to get there, right? And it also shows you how many gigameters it's going to take, how much fuel. Everything is available to you there, and you're seeing the current fuel allocation. Now, let's say you want to see in real time your fuel count down. Obviously, you have your HUD elements if you're on advanced HUD, but you can also use your MFDs. If I go here and I switch to self status, while I'm in nav mode, you can see my actual fuel counter is being shown here, and you can see it actually slowly counting down here as it's being used. So you can use that while you're in nav mode to identify your current fuel usage. Keep in mind that when you switch master modes, your MFD panels will switch. Your MFD panels are saved to your current master modes and operator modes. So when I'm in quantum travel, I usually like to use the self-status page. I like having that visual representation on the MFD showing me my fuel. That's my personal preference. You may have a different preference. But then when I go into SCM, I don't use self-status anymore. I usually use either the target page or the guns page or whatever, or as you see, the shields page down there. So I generally change my MFDs based on what my current master modes is. So that may be a thing that you may want to do. All right, so we're coming up on Pyro Gateway. As we drop out, it's going to drop us away a little bit distance away from the station. Now, I could choose to refuel here, but I have 85% fuel. I think we're doing fantastic here. If I were going to a planet, it's obviously going to drop us out in orbit of the planet. And then if you have a destination on the planet, you just point your nose at it and you do the exact same steps that we did here. And what your ship will do is what's known as a spline jump. It will automatically try to follow the curve of the planet to get around the planet to land on the destination. So if your destination is on the other side of the planet or moon, your ship will actually spline jump around it to get to your destination. So very, very cool. And definitely don't be afraid to use it when you're trying to get around to various locations in the verse. Now, what I'm going to show you guys here is how to use what's called the jump point. This is to get to the Pyro system, the other star system. Right now, currently we are in the Stanton system, so we want to jump to the Pyro system. Now, I'm at Pyro Gateway because you have to go through the gateway to get to the Pyro system from Stanton. Now, if you want to find where the gateway is, make sure you stay in nav mode and then you tap that tab button that we talked about earlier on your keyboard to enable that pulse. And we'll get a bunch of options that pop up. I can see all the turrets, but more importantly, you're going to notice in some areas, depending on where I'm at, you sometimes will get a marker where there it goes right there, and it says jump point detected, right? That is the jump point that I need to fly to get to Pyro, and you can actually see it is open right now. That big wormhole over there is opened up. So let's go ahead and mosey our way on over. And I'm going to show you the process of opening and closing a jump gate, flying through it, and then how to navigate your way around the Pyro system, which is very similar to what we just did here. But you obviously probably want to know how to kind of get around between all these places and use the jump gate. So that is what we're going to do here. Now, all you have to do is stay in nav mode, but in this case, I'm going to switch to SEM because I'm waiting for, there it goes, for the jump gate to close, because I want to show you what it's like when you open it and all the steps involved. So I'm going to get past these signs here that are warning me of extreme caution because Pyro is a dangerous place. I'm going to go ahead and align my nose with it, and then once I am past the sign, I'm going to switch back to nav mode. And everything here is automated. Now, my drive is now turning on the jump drive, which is now going to align myself with this jump gate here. And you'll see it says tuning. Once it says tuning is complete, you're going to hit left click on your mouse to then open the jump gate using your jump drive. There we go. It's now opening. And at this point, everything is automated. All you have to do is keep your nose pointed at it. And once the point is, the jump point is fully opened up, you will automatically be drawn into the jump point, and you will have control over your ship as you do that. So you'll see, here we go. So now we are being pulled into the jump point. And then we are now connected. Once you're in, throttle input is no longer necessary. You are all being drawn through, and the only thing that is responsive is your pitch, roll, yaw, and your strafe commands. You don't need to use your throttle. Your throttle is not being used at all here. Your ship is going to be automatically drawn through this entire process. What you need to do is you want to avoid all these little vortices that you see on here. If you crash into the sides or you crash into the vortices, you're given a little bit of leeway, but you're starting to build up what's known as distortion damage every time you hit them. You build up too much distortion damage, you will fail the jump and you'll be sped out either in Pyro or Stanton, and you'll be sped out very, very far away from any other location in the actual system that you're in, so it's going to cost you a lot of fuel to get back, assuming you even have the fuel to get back in the first place. So make sure you try to avoid these vortices and you try to stay away from these walls here. It's very simple. Again, all you have to do is use your strafe controls, your pitch, your roll, and your yaw, and you will be perfectly fine. You'll see these little dust particles in the center. That is telling you where you need to go. So you can follow that in until you reach the end of the jump point, which is coming up here shortly. And don't be too intimidated here. You know, a lot of these vortices look like they're very, very claustrophobic, but it's actually quite generous. As long as you're not directly crashing into them, you will be perfectly fine. All right, here we go. Here's the exit point. Now we're going to line ourselves up. You can see the Stanton gateway on the other side. And here we are out of the jump point. Now we can make our way to Stanton gateway here if we need to refuel. And, you know, we'll go ahead, maybe potentially do that now, but you can also go to any other location on here. So if I hit F2 on my keyboard and I zoom out, I can find the destination I need to get to. Now keep in mind, Pyro is much bigger than Stanton. I can click my destination. I can actually tap R on my keyboard to automatically route. Now keep in mind, like I said, Pyro is much bigger than Stanton, so it takes a lot more fuel getting around. But every station here does offer the ability to refuel. So just be sure that you have the fuel to get to where you need to go. So I set my jump point to Checkmate Station. So I'm going to go ahead now and jump to Checkmate Station using the steps we talked about previously. And away we go. And that's it. That's really the simplicity of it, folks. You can see now we are currently en route. It's going to take about 4.5 minutes for me to get to Checkmate Station. Once I get there, you're going to get to the station. You're going to do all the same steps. You're going to call the station, whether you use the MFDs, the Moby Glass, or the hotkey. Once you're assigned a hangar, you land, you can refuel, repair, rearm, whatever you need to do there, and then you can take off, or you can get out, go into the station, explore around, buy some stuff, whatever you need. And you can do this in a lot of various locations. In Star Citizen, you can do this at many of the major landing sites in Stanton. You can do this at the major stations here in Pyro, and you can do that even at small outposts here on Pyro and Stanton as well. There's small little trading outposts. There's tons and tons and tons of places for you to explore, and I highly recommend you do so. And I've given you now the tools and the know-how to do it. So hopefully this is going to be the start of a fantastic adventure for you all in Star Citizen. And that's going to cover the basics of flight in this game. As I mentioned, guys, look at the runtime on this video down below. This is a lot of information that we have to cover here just to talk about just the basics of flight. And that's because Star Citizen is, at its core, a simulation. Now, obviously, you're going to probably have a lot of questions. You're going to have type of weird issues here and there. If you do, leave them in the comments below. There's tons of other veteran players who also love watching these videos anyway, and they are more than happy to answer your questions. And of course, if you have other questions you want to ask, be sure to check out the link for my Discord down there below where you can ask questions too. We have tons and tons of new players that come into the Discord, all asking questions, asking for help, and also players who are looking to group up and do group activities as well too. So if you're looking for that, down below will be the link to that Discord that you can join as well. So that covers everything for this video, and I do hope you found it informative. If you did, please leave a like, as it really does help out the channel, and of course it helps promote this video so other rookie pilots like yourself and many others can go and find this video and get the information they need to be successful as they play this game and enjoy it to its fullest, because this game is fantastic. I mean, guys, I've been playing this game for many years, and it's still the #1 game I am always keeping on my hard drives, even when I switch new computers and whatnot, because I can't put myself to put it down. I can't. The game is just so much fun, and it's a fantastic joy to play. And it's been great over the years hanging out with you all and seeing that you all are sharing that same level of passion as I have. And I just want to pass that along and ensure that you all get the right information you need to enjoy it just as much as I've been enjoying it. So, like I said, if you enjoyed it, leave a like. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this and much more down the line, be sure to subscribe as well. And thanks, of course, to my channel members. Without them, their generous contributions to this channel, none of this would have been possible. Like, their generous contributions help me immensely when it comes to putting videos like this together. So if you want to help out and contribute to the channel and contribute to the work that I do here, consider becoming a channel member like these fine folks right here, who, like I said, their contributions are immeasurable. But until next time, fly safe, and I'll see you all in the black.